Episode number 35. I'm Steven Sersky. Folks, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. Today's episode, I have another fellow expat from United States, Illinois, USA. She joins me today here in Beijing, China. We actually had to have the conversation over Skype because, COVID has sort of kicked up a notch over the last little while, and my compound is facing some issues, to say the least. Tatiana McLaren joins me over Skype to talk about some of the things that she's interested in her life in China, especially some of her experiences being a Black American woman living overseas. We talk about life as an ESL teacher, some of the things that are going on in the blogging world and podcasting world, and how that's both helped us experience life overseas and at the same time made us a little bit more self-conscious as well. A lot of recommendations for books and movies and other materials that Tatiana actually keeps her own calendar on her website as well. So if you ever want to find out some of the sources that she is reading for the different months that she's involved in, notably Black History Month, Women's History Month, Movember as well, men's health awareness, suicide prevention, and a lot of other social causes that we talk about on this episode. All right, folks, episode number 35 with Tatiana McLaren. Hope you enjoy. All right, so then let's begin. Here we are. It's already, Beijing evening, end of November, leading up to U.S.-American Thanksgiving. Canadians had it a couple months ago, 6 weeks ago. And I have with me today Tatiana McLaren. McLaren?
My name's complicated. Just call me Tatiana.
Tatiana. Now, if I pronounce your name wrong, because I've been saying Tatiana, but it's not Tatiana. It's Tatiana.
Wait, Tatiana.
Okay, right. Because it's also a very common Ukrainian name, but they do something with they soften the second T. So if I pronounce it a little bit differently, that's why. Yeah. Fellow expat, Beijing. How is it going in your neck of the woods?
Oh, well, everything's pretty chill here, honestly. There was a bit of a fear of getting locked down last week, but didn't happen. So I panic bought a bunch of groceries for no reason. So There was that. But it's okay because I'm not locked down. So my friends came over and we just cooked like a really big meal. So it was a good time. So
have you guys had a lot of those fears of being locked down? Because as we were just talking, I'm locked down. I'm semi-officially locked down at the moment.
I mean, typically no. When my school went online, so there was a bit of a concern when my school went online. But honestly, my area has not been locked down yet. So knock, 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 has not been locked down yet. So,
hopefully not.
Nothing too terrible.
Do you know? Have any of your colleagues or anybody been locked down as well?
Oh yeah, but we don't all live together. We don't all live in the same area. So like my area is far enough west that we've been okay. But yeah, people were just like, so we woke up today and there was we're locked in our compounds. And I was like, well, all right.
Well, sorry, I guess I'll be the only one at the cafe this afternoon then.
So like, all right. Well, I mean, we're online, so it's all good to me.
Yeah.
But the school sent us online. So.
You're living in Beijing. You're in the west of Beijing. I'm imagining it's like Fengtai or someplace like that.
No. I'm not that south. I'm legit just west.
Okay.
So Shijingshan.
Oh, Shijingshan.
Nah, past Haidian.
Wow. Oh my, you're far west.
So Haidian is north and a little bit east.
How are you even in Beijing?
Like I'm connected. I'm connected to Haidian. It's like right above us, but it's like over to the east a bit. Because my school's in Haidian. So yes.
That's a far ways away. Okay, well that's why we did this online.
Yes it is.
You're basically like in the next. You're like in the next city almost, aren't you? Is it still considered Beijing, or is it next city? Wow, craziness.
Nope, still Beijing. Beijing is huge. But I'm like out past the fifth ring.
Wow. Oh. I'm guessing your rent is a little bit cheaper than mine.
I mean, probably, but probably not.
I pay almost 7,000 per month.
I pay 6.
Okay. So you have a huge apartment too, or not?
I mean, bigger than a hutong, but not like massive.
Just enough to fit a media studio in it.
No. I mean, maybe if I bought less stuff, I could fit better stuff in here. Got a lot of stuff I don't need. Just like I'm looking at my apartment, like, yeah, I don't need half of this.
It's terrible, isn't it? You start accumulating stuff. Have you lived in the same place for a very long time, or like have you moved
Since I moved
around?
to Beijing.
Really? And how long was that?
I got here in 2019, August 2019.
Just before the fun started.
Just before the fun started. Yep.
And you've been accumulating stuff ever since. That's good. I've been in the same place for like 6-7 years already. So it's
you're worse than me.
And we were talking about accumulating green screens and stuff like that. I'm going, yeah. When you every new mic stand is another corner of the room that gets occupied, or becomes a new clothesline, as I discovered with the large. I had that big frame to hang up sheets, and I was like, this is perfect for drying my bed sheets.
Oh, nice.
Dual purpose.
I have a dryer.
Okay, well, so you are richer than me because I don't have a dryer.
No. It was a gift. Look, can't even say gift. One of my friends left. Everybody went home situation, and then people couldn't get back. She was somebody who couldn't get back, and she had a dryer, and she was like, "Well, you can just keep it till I get back." That was like 4 years ago. So I have a dryer.
Yeah, that's a good. I don't. I just have the washer and then the clothes rack that the landlord left here. But that's good. I mean, not many people drying clothes is not a Chinese thing to do. Like your clothes in the window so everyone can see what you wear, and that is the method that you dry clothes in this country.
Yeah, I mean, I've done that before, but I didn't love it.
It's a little revealing. Well, I don't think they look. I mean, honestly, it'd be different if you were in the States or in Canada doing that, and people are like, oh, interesting. But in China, they're just drying clothes, whatever.
Yeah, I don't think it might go. When I lived in Liberia, we had to dry our clothes outside because obviously there was no electricity, so there was no running water. There was you washed them in like a bucket with an actual washboard, and then you hung them out on an actual clothesline. So when I talk about people seeing your underwear, like it's literally outside on the clothesline outside of your house.
Yeah.
Like see exactly what you've been wearing. It's not a good time.
You
my personal favorite is when like the kids would come by and they'd be like, "You didn't do a good job washing these." Oh, I was like, "I don't know how to wash using a washboard." I'm trying.
Well,
like was nothing like having 6-year-olds yell at you.
Was it a boy or girl who was criticizing your washing?
It didn't matter.
Oh, it didn't matter. They all did. Oh, wow.
Just walked by like this was not done right.
Well, I don't think I've ever. My girlfriend hand washes some clothes, and I'm just like, nah, it's not done. No, it's into the washer or it's not getting washed. Not gonna happen. Yeah. Because we've traveled a bit, and it's kind of like I take enough to sort of sustain per 3-day, 4-day wash cycle. That's it. But you said Iberia, so you've been other places other than China as well?
Yeah, not very many. I was a Peace Corps at one point, and so that's where I was. Right. But but I mean, it was cool. It was a different experience than China for sure.
Was that just before China, or when was that?
Shortly before China, and I went home for like a year in between, and then I came to China. So yeah, it was interesting.
So I mean, we got to do introductions. Expat. What brought you to China? Who are you, and what are you doing here? I mean, like, what happened that this country drew you in?
Oh, I get that. This question is such a fun one. Let's see. So I'm Tatiana, and I am boring. I don't really do exciting things.
That's not true. That is not true. You are a very busy woman.
I'm not very fun. Let's see what brought me to China. Well, it was twofold, but mainly I kind of wanted to go somewhere where I stuck out, which I know seems weird, but Like my biggest issue with I know. Like my biggest issue with Liberia was like the experience was such a different one because I looked like everybody there. So I got to see it from the inside, and there are elements of that I didn't love. So I kind of wanted to know what it was really like to be a foreigner. Like my white friends who were Peace Corps, they had a different experience than I did. And it was not all positive because they were basically constantly on display, and it was really affecting how their mental health. And I just couldn't understand what they were talking about. And so I kind of wanted to know what that felt like. So I was like, I'll go to China. That's kind of what brought me here initially.
Where did the idea of China come from?
The Peace Corps, actually.
Okay.
So I went to the Peace Corps in 2016, but I had been accepted in 2010, and I was supposed to go to China, but life happened and I wasn't able to go. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of like always had been like, oh, I really kind of want to go see what it's like. And so when I was like, I could go anywhere, where should I go? And so I tried to go to South Korea and do whatever that main teaching thing is in South Korea. I tried to do GEPIC. Yeah, but they had one called GEPIC at one point.
Yep. Yes, they did.
And I tried to do GEPIC, but I guess it was like the year they were phasing it out. Because I don't think it's
2017, 2018.
Yeah, I think it was like the year they were phasing it out that I tried to do it, and so I just didn't get it, and then I found a job here, so I came to China.
That's wow. Okay, South Korea is where I started my whole stint of traveling overseas and living overseas. I was part of the EPIC program, not the GEPIC, because GEPIC is what does that stand for? Government. I can't remember what it stands for.
Yeah, I don't know. I just remember that I was watching a bunch of YouTube videos, and someone mentioned that one was easier for Black people to get into, because that is also something I think about when I travel abroad.
Is it a big concern?
When traveling abroad, absolutely.
Especially like where you're gonna teach and work.
Teaching.
But you're
working,
looking Asian countries, like because you mentioned like South Korea and China, and I'm sure our experiences in these countries are very different from one another. I think it almost goes without saying. But so what are your sort of concerns when you are applying for these jobs in these places?
Oh, well, I mean, part of it's jobs, part of it's cultural acceptance. Because like at least in the States, there are laws that prevent discrimination. That does not mean discrimination doesn't happen, but there are laws that prevent it. And when you go to other countries, those laws don't exist. And then you're also a foreigner, so there's even less protection. So you have to worry about stuff like that. And then just culturally, how will you be treated? How will you be accepted? How will you be taken? You don't really want to go someplace where people fetishize you or where people view you as a potential threat. So it's just kind of things you have to weigh when traveling and figuring out where to work.
So, okay, so you mentioned South Korea. That didn't work out. China did. Where else were you thinking of going?
I don't really know yet. I've got a couple of places in mind.
Well, what about a couple of years ago when you were applying, like when you were thinking of first going to China, what were the other options?
Honestly, my brain was very much China or South Korea. Because I'd had that like, oh, the Peace Corps was going to send you and you couldn't go. You should go complete that in my brain. And then South Korea was just some place I'd heard was friendly to Black people. But those are the two places in my brain that were the most like popping. Then there was also Thailand, because in undergrad, I was very into trying to work with organizations to prevent sex trafficking. So going to Thailand was kind of like, I would love to go there and work with the girls and help save people. And I have learned that as I get older, the more dangerous that sounds and the less I want to do it. There's something about being in your 20s that like makes you fearless.
You don't know all the concerns, and that's actually a good thing, because in your 20s you do take these risks, and somehow the world protects a lot of what you do. Now there's some stupid things you can do as well, but I mean a lot of times you know enough to get yourself into trouble, but you're dumb enough to also get yourself out of trouble because they're like, this person actually has no idea what they're doing either. So, so you want to go to Thailand? I mean, that would have been Peace Corps, teaching English, and then Thailand with the sex trafficking work. I mean, helping out.
That's what I wanted. So.
Right. So where does this sort of all fit in here? I mean, what made you go the teaching English rather than go to Thailand?
Well, a lot of NGOs wanted you to have at least 2 years of overseas experience. That was kind of where teaching English came in, because it was like I had to leave the Peace Corps early because I had to have a surgery and they couldn't do it in country. So I cut my time from, I wasn't 2 years. So I was like, I need at least 1 more year. And then I also was like, I could come and save money, which I still have not done. I was like, let me come save money and get this extra year. And so like I did 1 year in Zhengzhou and was like, okay, I want to try a big city. So I came to Beijing, and then I got to Beijing, and 3 months later, COVID. So just been here ever since.
Locked in, locked down, have nowhere else to go, really. So,
like, all right, I guess that's what we're doing.
Zhengzhou. Okay, so I have to ask about Zhengzhou, because I've been to Zhengzhou a couple times and I thought it was a pretty good city. I don't know.
Zhengzhou. I love it.
You were only there for 3 months.
No, I was there for a year.
Oh, for a year.
But,
okay.
Yeah, but I was here for 3 months when
Right.
COVID hit. But no, I was there for a year. I loved Zhengzhou. It was great. Everybody was, I don't want to be like, oh, everybody was always so friendly, because that is not true. But the expat community was like really tight knit. The drama did occur a lot.
Really?
But I mean, where there are people, there is drama.
I don't know.
But it was so much fun. I had a lot more friends that were multicultural in Zhengzhou. I think in Beijing, it's been harder to make friends outside of like my American Canadian circle. It's like we all just kind of gravitate to each other and then stay there.
Well, a lot of my colleagues are Brits. We used to have a lot of Scots, but they all left. Like this year, pretty much a lot of the Scotsmen have left with their families. A lot of Americans, not too many Canadians. Canadians all left as well. I'm like one of the few that stayed.
Yeah, one of my Canadian friends left last year. So yeah, it's just kind of, I feel like we kind of gravitate towards cultures that are similar to ours and then just kind of stay. And so in Zhengzhou, I had a lot of friends who were from different cultures because we were just all mixed up together. And so you found people you liked. So
that's pretty neat, though.
Kind of different. Yeah, I loved it. Unfortunately, almost all of them are out of the country now because of COVID. So
by choice or by force? Like, were they like, so you had to leave, or they wanted to come back, but they just weren't able to?
A lot of them wanted to come back and just couldn't, or by the time they were able to, it took too long and now they've got lives elsewhere. Or it was a lot of that. Or they were in Zhengzhou and then the job well dried up. And Zhengzhou got hit with that massive flood last year.
Yes.
So like, yeah, it has not been easy for everybody there. Excuse me. So yeah, it's just been kind of, they've been in and out. So a lot of them are gone.
Yeah. Is there still an expat community in Zhengzhou? Do you know, or has that been sort of dried up?
Honestly, I don't know that I talk to anyone in Zhengzhou anymore. Like all of my friends that were in Zhengzhou are gone. Right. I'm pretty sure Zach's is still there because I don't think Zach will ever leave. Zach's
I
barbecue.
think they are. Yeah, fantastic. I messaged that lady. I'm like, you are the reason I come to Zhengzhou. That's not true, but I mean, yes. I'm like this. The reason I show up for work in Zhengzhou is because of Zach's barbecue.
So good. Zach's barbecue is the best. I know Zach is still there with Teresa, but I don't know about anybody else.
Okay, so then quick question. Do you know any place that is similar to Zach's barbecue that is in Beijing? Because I haven't found it. Nothing, huh? Okay.
No.
It's the one. I know there's Home Plate. Home Plate does good ribs, but I mean, I haven't been there in a while. I know there's other places that offer things that look like ribs, but they're not Zach's BBQ ribs. So anyway.
Yeah, Zach's is pretty fabs.
Did you have you ever thought about getting out of China in the last? I mean, you moved to Beijing, locked down, but you didn't know. You didn't know back in 2020 that it was going to be 4 years and counting, 3 years and counting.
Yeah.
Where would you go if you were to flee or leave the country?
Oh, I guess it depends on how quickly and why I'm going.
Yes. A nice, genteel, cordial. You're not being escorted to the border. I mean, you've chosen to leave, and they're not interfering with this.
I don't know where to go. Dubai sounds like it'd be a fun place to go, I think. That's been on my list. Thailand is still on my list. Dubai, Thailand. I would go home to visit my folks, and then I'd be back out though, because I don't want to be there. Huh? Why not? What?
Why not?
I'm sorry. Do you not watch the news?
Because I was reading your website and I did send you a message about Chicago, and you're like, I'm not from Chicago. I'm like, okay, right. But you're from Illinois. Chicago has a reputation. The whole state has a bit of a reputation. I don't know. I've only driven through it maybe twice, and this was years ago, sort of thing. So, so you don't want to be in your home, because I don't want to be in my hometown either, but probably for different reasons. I found the fact that I could travel, Canadian passport, English. I can work a lot of different places. The job opportunities are far more for me outside of my hometown, even outside of Canada, than they are around the world. But it means that, there's a certain discomfort that you have to accept. Learning different cultures and ways of doing things and languages and everything. So how long do you think you would last in your hometown? If, you said, because you didn't want to be there. How long before you're like, okay, that's it, gotta go?
Okay, so where I grew up is not where my family lives currently. So where my family lives currently, I would probably last a year before it was just time to go. And that's basically what happened last time. I made it almost a year, and then it was like, nope. Can't do this. And I wouldn't have made it that long, except I had to have eye surgery, and then I had to recover, and then I had to save money, which was super hard. But yeah, no, it was like less than a year before I'd be like, it's time to go. Like, this is not for me. And it's not just like I don't want to make it seem like I'm not bad mouthing my hometown or my city. I'm not even bad mouthing the state. I'm bad mouthing the country. Right. I'm over the country. Like, I need a break, and it needs to be longer.
I've heard this from a lot of Americans a lot of expats. A lot of people are fed up with everything just everything, the whole gauntlet of the social media tirades on both sides, the inequality, and then I guess how's the job market? Because I'm guessing that probably sucks.
In the city where we live, it's not very great. At least not for. I mean, there are jobs, but it's not a lot of them. And I don't have any useful skills. I say, funnily.
What is your hometown known for in terms of, like, if someone were to rock on up, like a Chinese person were to immigrate to your hometown, what would they? And they were willing to take any job. What would be the first job that they would be offered or find?
Well, if we're talking where I grew up, that's close to St. Louis. They could pretty much find work anywhere, doing a myriad of things. But it wouldn't be stuff that was very highly paid. Because, like St. Louis, where I grew up, St. Louis was like 30 minutes away. So you could go work anywhere in St. Louis and have a reasonable commute if you had a car. Where we live currently, I don't know. I wasn't really there long enough. I mean, I was there for like a year, and all I could find was temp work for real. There just wasn't a whole lot in the job market, but that was also like 4+ years ago. So it might be different now, but I doubt it. I know my sisters tend to do home healthcare work.
Okay.
Because that's pretty readily available, but that's also what we call, mandatory work. So whenever there's a COVID outbreak, they still have to work. They're essential employees, rather.
Oh, they're essential. Yeah.
So it ends up they still have to work. So it's a bit more. It's not very highly paid, but it's also very dangerous depending on what's going on. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think I wouldn't recommend it. I feel like if people are traveling to To America, they should stick to big cities and go to small ones to see what it's like.
Right. Well, which big city would you recommend that they stay in?
I mean, I don't know. I've only really been to a couple. Chicago's obviously a good one. I mean, America's huge, so I haven't been to very much of my own country. It's a huge country, and then it's an expensive country. Traveling from one part to the other is super expensive. Like, I moved from Illinois to Arizona, and it took me 3 days to move all my stuff because I drove cross country. It took me 3 days and cost me at least $600 because it was like between gas and then hotels and stuff to get from point. I mean,
I say it's not bad, but back then, I mean, probably $600 was a lot of money, when you're trying to budget yourself, sort of thing.
I feel like it's the budgeting aspect because now $600 isn't that big of a deal. But when I think about what it was like to be paycheck to paycheck and how long it took to save up, the $1,000 I had to get from point A to point B, it took months just because like if you're working a job where you don't make a lot, you can't save a lot. So it took forever. So I would not willfully enter into that situation again. I probably will have to because of karma, but I would not willfully enter into it.
Well, the whole, I think that's one of the reasons actually I would, when people ask me like, oh, you can, get out of China, you can come back. I'm kind of like, I just do the calculation of the amount of money that you could make and the style of life that I have here. And I don't live extravagantly, although I think my girlfriend would say, yes, you do. Although with all this podcasting that I've started doing, that's helped take down some costs, but risen others, because like I'm buying electronics rather than going to the bar sort of thing, right? But that being the case, you factor in all those costs, my rent, my food here. I don't pay for a gym because I work out outside, but I have the room to work out outside. If I were to replicate this, I don't know where I could replicate it back in Canada, and I don't know where else I could do it around the world. I mean, I'm sure there's other places. It's just, I mean, it works for me right now. Is this, because I've heard this, the whole payment inequality in the States, what is it? I have no clue because I've never worked in the States, so I don't know just how bad the sort of the pay gap and the your cost of living actually is.
I did this math with someone once. It
and that's all it needed.
It depends on what type of job you have. So if you're working minimum wage, and you're single, you get more taken out in taxes. So if you're single working minimum wage, maybe you're bringing home a minimum wage. What is minimum wage now?
$15.
See, my numbers are off because my numbers would have been from 2016. So I don't even know what it is now. But I think minimum wage with a reasonable apartment of it's hard to say because depending on where you live will determine how much your apartment costs. When I lived in Phoenix, my apartment was about $700 USD a month. When I lived in Belleville, you could get an apartment for maybe $400 a month, and it was bigger. Yeah, but the cost of living in Belleville is lower, but you also make less money. Right. So it's kind of hard to say what the take home is because it depends on where you are, what the standard of living for that area is, what the average take home is, because you can make $40,000 a year, but if everything costs a crap ton of money, you end up with less money than someone who makes less than you. So it just kind of depends on where you are. So.
You've mentioned like half the country at this point in terms of at least my knowledge of this. You got Phoenix, you got Belleville, you got Chicago, St. Louis, St. Louis, or
there are 50. I mentioned 3.
And for all I know there's Canadians are famous for ragging on Americans for not knowing geography, but my geography of the American states is probably horrible. Do a lot of Americans have that sort of ability, that choice to move around and pick where they want to go? Because in my hometown, there was never talk of like, I'm from Winnipeg, the center of Canada. No one was ever going, let's move to Saskatoon, let's move to Thunder Bay. No one. It was you were in Winnipeg or you moved to Toronto or Vancouver. That was it. Those were your choices, basically. Hometown or big city.
I think that usually when people move, it's for work.
Right.
Like you might move to a bigger city for a better job, or you might move to a small area for a better job. Usually it's for work. Everybody I know who's moved, it's been for work or for school. They went to school in a place and they liked it and they stayed. So I don't think growing up, I think there was more of that idea of everybody is staying in the same spot, but that was pre-internet. Oh my God. So like
Pre-internet. What dark ages are you talking about?
Because I think the internet and its fabulousness showed up when I was in grade school. So I think even then, though, it wasn't the great connector that it is now.
Yeah.
Because I'll have these young 20-year-olds. We'll have conversations about. I'm trying to be polite. We'll have conversations about like the differences and things, and it's I find it funny because there are things that are just base knowledge to them that wasn't available for me to know at that time. So it's just kind of like, because they grew up in a different era. They grew up where it was always here. So the idea of just hopping on your phone and going, "Hey Siri," went to make sure she didn't answer. That's happened a couple times. Being able to do that, it's always been there for them, and that was not there. I remember having to use encyclopedias, like real ones.
You had to open them up and actually read them, not use them to open your door, like keep them, or makeshift weights.
Crazy. I know, crazy encyclopedias. We actually had A through Z at home. Like I remember encyclopedias. So it's just it's hard to say. It's hard to say what the mindset is now, because the mindset when I remember is drastically different. So
are the kids, are they still moving as much as you did, or that people that did? Like a young 20-year-old, a 20-year-old. Like I guess I can't adjectify them. They're not young. They're people.
They're younger.
These 20-year-old kids, I'm going to call them kids. Are they moving around the country as much as even your generation, our generation, because we're very close in age?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I feel like I bumped into a lot of people here in their 20s, and that's blown my mind because I was definitely 30 when I finally left the country. I was 27 when I finally left the country to go to the Peace Corps. So like I was like 30 when I got here. So yeah, like it's even the idea of being able to come here to study high school or to study college is like mind blowing, because I just wasn't. I remember college, like searching for colleges, and it was literally looking through catalogs. Yeah. And like sending off for information and then like flipping through pamphlets. That's what I remember.
Not having an entrance interview over Skype across the world.
Yeah.
Sort of thing, right?
Yeah. Like it's the whole idea of traveling and I wanted to travel to another state for college and then didn't because I wanted to go to Florida, and there were just a bunch of hurricanes that hit around the same time as I was leaving. And I was like, nah. But just even then, it's just even in 2016 or 2006, the internet was still different than it is now. Like much Facebook had barely taken off. Oh, yeah. Like it was barely a thing. I didn't even have a Facebook until college. I think I got a Facebook in 2007.
That seems to be the time. I remember there was a girl who told me to get on there. I was like, okay, sure. But it wasn't for her necessarily, but it was like what all the work people were doing at that time when I was working my temp job at that time. But I fully respect these kids who study overseas. Because I did work at a university where they had this that dual program, like the international program. So they'd come here for 2 years and they go back to the States for 2 years, or some change, like Oklahoma State, I think was one of them, and Denver was the other university involved. And I'm like, wow, you kids you're brave. Like for me, at 20 years old, I'm thinking I was not good to travel. It just wasn't in my family. It wasn't in the conversations. It wasn't amongst the friends. It was nothing. It just didn't exist as a topic. It was one of those things that if you're going to travel, you have to have money, and how are you going to do it? Right. And
yeah.
why don't you stay here, get a job if you want like real life experience. And then a master's degree later, and I was like, nah, I'm getting out anyway. It's time to go.
Yeah. Yeah, for us it was very much military. If you want to leave, join the military. And I was too fat for the military. So
what branch of the military would you have gone into?
I mean, I tried for the Air Force, of course.
Right. Is that the cool one? I don't know.
That's yes. Not I will piss off my country. I will not piss off the military.
Right.
Say mean things about the country, not the military. The military is awesome.
This is
protect me.
This is another huge difference between the United States and Canada, that there's a military culture in the United States that does not exist in Canada. Like in Canada, it's like when you leave high school, again, the same with traveling, there's no talk of going to the military. Even though if you join the military, and I didn't really understand this, the military pays for everything. I guess what worried me back then, as some kind of worries me now, contracts and commitment and things like this, were that when you join the military, they pay for your education, but you basically sign a contract that when they pay for X number of years of schooling, you serve for X number of years afterwards, or Y number of years. I guess no one, again, I think I had two uncles who were in the military, but when I actually knew them as people, I didn't really know what they did. Right. So it wasn't a conversation around the dinner table or anything like that. It was, my family came from farmers and teachers. That's what we talked about. So that's sort of what we were looking at, and things like that. But the United States has much more of a military culture, and you kind of meet people here who's like, oh yeah, I served in the military. I'm like, then why are you here if you did? What happened?
Yeah. It's a different culture.
Very much so. But you came into you got into China. You started traveling. You said at 27. What was sort of what do you remember thinking about that really changed your mind from being stateside and then going, nah, I want to see the larger world?
Oh, I always knew. I always knew I wanted to leave. It was just how to get the money to get out. But I always knew I wanted to leave. I've always been very much. I remember when I bought my first car, it was a necessity, but I hated it because it meant being tied down. And then I remember when I was looking for apartments, I didn't want to buy one because signing a lease meant having to stay in the same spot for a year. Okay, I was like, I've always wanted to just get up and go places. So I knew that I wanted that. And in college, I did do a week in London and loved it. And I was just like, I have to go other places. Asia was kind of a happy happenstance because, Peace Corps was like, go, and then I couldn't go. And so it was kind of always in the back of my mind. Europe was kind of where I really wanted to go explore. But, Europe is more expensive than most of Asia. So
everybody wants to go to Europe, but that currency exchange, it just kills you.
Yeah, it does. But yeah, I've always wanted to travel, I think.
And it looks like you started blogging. I was doing some research here. You started your blog because you're a writer as well. Back in 2010, I think your first blog post. I think that was the first one that I found.
Yeah.
But you started traveling. Website. So was this before or after you started traveling?
That was, I did so 2010 would have been when I graduated from university. So I went to London for a week. So but roughly after I came back, no, that was after I graduated. I started the blog after I graduated college. Oh gosh, that blog. I've changed it multiple times. I've tried to make it nicer, but the reality is I don't like writing on it.
It's very purple.
I love purple.
I could tell. I was wondering.
Everybody says that. And I'm like, I could change it to be more pleasing, but then I won't like it. So. Well,
the other thing that sort of stands out is that it is very 2010. It looks like it's a very good artifact from that time, from that decade.
But it's funny because I just made it recently. So I revamped the website. And
right. Okay. Because they're timestamped differently. I was looking at this going, but wait a minute. This says this is dated this, but it's timestamped this. I'm going, wait a minute. And I'm not sure if anyone else looks at these things, but I was kind of going, okay, I got to figure out a timeline here at some point.
Yeah, because I bought a website because I had a blog, and so I bought a website and I imported all my stuff from the blog over. And so that's why the dates are 2010, but the
Right.
timestamps are recent. But yeah, it's definitely, it's got an old feel to it because I have
Vintage.
not left.
The vintage
It'll
internet
circle back.
feels.
It'll circle back. It always circles back.
Well, at least you have it though. And are you still adding to it? I'm not sure what was the latest blog post you have, but I mean, you're not just a blogger anymore. You're also a podcaster and I guess a writer, of course. But then you're an event host, event coordinator.
Yes. I don't even know what you call the stuff I do. I struggled to have names for it because I just kind of do stuff. Yeah, the writing hasn't been as intense or as driven because I'm trying to do more stuff out and about because I feel like I like writing. It brings me some sort of catharsis. However, it's very singular. Like you're very much by yourself. It's isolating, and I can isolate myself on my own. So I'm trying to trying to do more stuff that's more connective and more out there. And some of my blog posts have really good information, but nobody reads blogs anymore. And that was kind of why I was like, maybe I should do a podcast. But no one listens to my podcast either. But it's I was like, I want to try to get wisdom out into the world because there's so much stuff that I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Listen, I promise I have some life experience and listen to me too. I don't know.
And because some people ask, they ask about my statistics and everything. I don't even, I used to track my blogging statistics when it first came out, because that, like, when 2010, 2011, that was sort of a big push to like monetize your website. You can work and travel around the world, passive income, this and that. And then when this podcast thing became huge, like a couple of years ago, I think we started ours at the same time. You started in 2020 as well, or thereabouts. Yeah. I just ignored the whole analytics. I'm like, listen, kids, let me tell you how it is. Okay, first of all, no one's going to listen. Second of all, no one's going to listen. And third of all, I'm going to do it anyway. It's not so much about, whether or not they listen now. It's in a year or 2 years. You have that sort of catalog of stuff to draw upon. And I don't know about you and your podcasting. I listened to some of my first episodes and I go, oh God, that's cringy. Oh boy.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I went through a title change. So my first episode was titled Tatiana Talks.
Yes,
and I liked it, but then I like hopped on Facebook and realized there was already something called that. And I didn't want to like step on toes. So I just went ahead and I was like, I've had Hopelessly Tatiana for like over a decade. I'll just use that. Which then I got, like, my friends were like, I don't like podcasts. I don't say what you're talking about in the title. And I'm like, so what should I change it to? I don't know, but find something else. I was like, I don't want to do a third title change. I'm like, this is, all right, okay. Like, so I guess I'm of the same mind as you, where I'm very much, I feel the same way about my podcast as I do about my blog. People will circle back.
It's there if they want to look, right?
It'll be...
I found it very cathartic, very, very cathartic. A lot of the writing, because in my 20s, I did a lot of like the creative writing and stuff like that. But then when I started traveling, I only started my blog after I started traveling. And one of the reasons why that I started it was to keep track of everything. And my first couple of posts were like day 0, day 1. Like I recorded the first day that I actually bought my video camera in Bangkok, Thailand.
Oh.
And when I started backpacking through Southeast Asia after that. So it was sort of like a memory, and it helped push me into certain circumstances. It also helps jog my mind, my memory of like where I've been before. And it helped me sort of force myself to go through all the photos and the videos. I don't know about you. Do you take a lot of photos and videos like that you just put on hard drives that disappear and you're like, I'm not even sure if it's in this country anymore? Yeah.
I think when I went to London for that 1 week, I took over 1,000 pictures. And like, I don't think I've looked at them. Like I remember uploading the coolest ones to Facebook and they became my like profile picture for a while, but I haven't really looked at them since.
Yeah. No, but it's good though, and I encourage anybody who now it's podcasting. Podcasting's a big thing, and I find even for myself, I don't listen to many podcasts. There's a few that I listen to a lot of finance, not a lot. I listen to 2 finance podcasts, and that's about it. But I know people are on the run, and one of the reasons I went into podcasting is because like I was crafting these 2,000 word posts, and you're right, like no one is going to read it. I can embolden the important parts, and I'm sitting there going, well, why am I emboldening all the parts? Why don't I just put the parts in bold in the post and take out everything else, right? And I was like, well, if I just create a podcast, then people can listen to my sexy, scintillating voice as they're doing other things.
Okay. I don't know. Am I supposed to co-sign that? I don't know.
But I guess I don't know if I should follow this up, but one of the other reasons I started a podcast is because as my mother gets older, I was like, she's not going to want to read my blog that much either. So at least she can hear my voice instead, which also may be a commentary that, Stephen, maybe you should call home a little bit more so your mother knows what your voice still sounds like. I know. Bad son. Bad son.
Aw. Yes, bad son. Call home. Call your mom.
How has your experience been podcasting, blogging? Because over a decade writing, and now you are in Beijing. You are, I said event coordinator, because you host these poetry readings. You just had one last week, but you run your own podcast. What's been your experience in running these activities?
I don't know. I'm weird. Like, there's a minor amount of rhyme and reason. But I love them. I love the poetry events. They're so much fun. Everybody's so chill. The last one had like a mini concert, which made it even more fun. And the last one, I wasn't on stage. Like I introduced and I closed out because I had to provide information. But for the most part, I wasn't on stage like at all for the last one. And it was cool to sit there and watch. But it also was very much like, I do this because I like being on stage. It was very clear. But it was fun. Like, I enjoy doing them. I enjoy being able to bring people together in a different kind of a way. And it's fun. Like, it's fun. And I also like to spread awareness of things. So men's mental health was the theme for this one. I did a play for Women's History Month. I did a spoken word for Black History Month with all Black cast. And I do different things depending on we did a panel for Suicide Awareness Month. You made that flyer and the one for last week. So thanks. I am terrible at flyers. Really the worst. They all look exactly the same. I'm not good at it.
I'm just using Canva templates. I'm modifying Canva templates. That's it. But it's just changing things, little elements. That's all. I'm making sure it's balanced. It really does have to be balanced. If it's not balanced, then it looks odd.
I use Canva too, and stuff still comes out looking exactly the same. So, good job. Not my forte.
The inspiration for the blog. What was the original inspiration for the blog? Was it just to start writing, publishing your short stories and poetry back then?
Okay, this is gonna make me really old.
Uh-oh.
I know you're older than me, so I'm probably being extra, but like... Okay.
Not by much. Not by much.
Okay, cool. Do you remember, well, you're not American, classic literature. Is that your thing?
Which classic?
Do you like classic?
I studied classics. Yes. I do not.
Yeah.
But I know people who listen to this podcast, they read this stuff, yes.
I absolutely loved Ella Montgomery. She's not classic. She's not like Bronte sisters classic, though I do love the Bronte sisters. But Ella Montgomery has her most famous book series is Anne of Green Gables. But the one that I fell in love with when I was little was called Emily of New Moon. And I really identified with Emily's story. And in Emily's story, she was a writer. And what she would do is she would write these short stories and she would send them off to magazines. And then they'd pay her little small amounts. And And then eventually she wrote a book, and then that got published. There's like a whole story that's not related to the writing that I loved. But I remember being like, I want to do that. And then so in grade school, I started writing poetry, and I won my first poetry contest in 5th grade. And then I remember in high school, I'd submit more poetry to different books and stuff like that. And they'd get published, but never win anything. And I guess I kept writing because I kept being like, I really wanted to do, but by our age, that's not something that's really done anymore. Like you can shift stuff off to magazines, but they don't really care. It's harder to find ones that'll publish things. Everybody and their mom wants to be a writer. So there's so much stuff shifting there, like being sent there. So I remember just being like, oh, well, this blog was just me trying to be a better writer. And some of it was like diary entries. Some of it is, I like to think of myself as kind of the modern day Aesop's fables. So a lot of my stories, the creative writing stories, have a theme. There's a lesson that you learn when you read it. Like my favorite one is called Higher Ground. But all of them have something that you should take away, that you should learn. Some of them are more nail on head, like Butterflies. That one's very clear. But others are like you read them and then you kind of take a lesson from them. And that's kind of was the purpose of the blog, was so I could write and get that out. And then I guess the podcast came. There are many reasons for the podcast, one of which was spite. But
what? Who were you spiting?
But the thought process that created the idea for the podcast was actually me complaining about Americans not knowing enough about civics. Because my undergraduate degree is in political science. And the original idea for the podcast was to be very focused on civics. But I'm a teacher Monday through Friday all day. And I get home and I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. And so that's kind of when it shifted, because I tried and I was like, I don't want to write basically a whole nother lesson plan and do more. If I had a different job, I think I would be far more interested in being more like, all right, but when my job is so teaching oriented, I was like, I need something a bit more creative. Yeah. So I still do heavy topics, but kind of took a gear shift towards mental health. That's kind of been the recent focus. I don't know me. I just kind of
I think another big difference between Americans and Canadians, that U.S. Americans, they love their politics, they love their social issues, and they love debate, and they love all of this. And there's this guy. I mentioned this. I started doing this ESL podcast with this guy who's living in Georgia right now, and I asked him, like, dude, why don't you start your own current affairs podcast or your newsletter or blog or something? Like, because he is one of these guys who's very enthusiastic about everything, like you name anything that the United States is involved in, and he is like, well, let me tell you about the history of this. And he's been on my podcast before. He's a good guy to talk to, but I've always wondered why more people aren't. Maybe there's too many of them. I don't know that everyone wants to publish at the same time. But and the most recent description of this is that a lot of Americans, they talk about like issues, but they don't talk about policy, something along those lines. I wasn't entirely sure what was meant by it. I meant to get clarification, but like a lot of the debates and everything center around like issues that you can see on top, but they don't deal with sort of the underlying sort of reasons and strings that are sort of pulling things in different ways.
Okay, so that was two separate things. So that statement was two separate things. So issues and policies is one thing, and then issues in the historical context is a whole nother. So people talking about issues is like whatever the current issue is, that's what they're talking about. Right. Policy is more about what we can do to fix it. What can we do on a governmental level? What bills can be passed? What grassroots organizations? How can we mobilize to create change that becomes laws, that becomes permanently impactful? That would be policy. And typically, especially during political seasons, there tend to be more talking points related to issues because people don't care about policy. They care about hearing you talk about their issues.
Yeah.
And part of that is a lack of understanding of how policy works. Policy is long and it is boring. It is not fun, like drafting bills,
Sounds
drafting
great.
all of that stuff. It is long, it is boring, and it involves a lot of compromise that most people would not be comfortable with. So a lot of times when we criticize people like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and even Mitch McConnell, a lot of the criticisms come from a lack of understanding of how policy works because there's a lot of compromises that have to be made. So that's kind of what that is. And issues are just hot button topics that everybody can instantly have their cortisol levels rise.
Right.
The other thing you said were issues and the historical context. That's different. So you can have an issue that has a historical reason behind it. Like one that I can say, because I'm Black, is reparations. So when we talk about reparations, you've got people, that's a hot button, it's an issue. And then we'll talk about the policy changes. But the policy changes, people don't like them because they have historical implications they don't understand. So you might understand, oh, well, there was slavery, but that was 100 years ago. But if you don't know about redlining and what that did to districts, if you don't understand what gerrymandering does, if you don't understand about the housing market and how they purposely prevented Black people from being able to own property, even when they could legally do so, if you don't understand about how generational wealth impacts your ability to get loans, because you need collateral to get a loan to buy a business, you don't understand the historical context. So when we say reparations, you just say, why am I giving you my hard-earned money? And we're saying, we haven't been able to build generational wealth, so we're behind you, even if we work really hard.
Right.
So that line, that's very, very, very skim the top level. It's different levels of things, and unlike your friend, I try not to stay too up to date because I like to know stuff, but my blood pressure has been a lot better since I stopped paying attention. And
anxiety levels, sleep habits, talking to the wall. Yep. And all sorts of just kind of changes when you get off of Twitter. To be honest, Twitter has become a source of comedy, not for any of the political commentary, but I follow this account called Fesspool, in which British people confess their worst things that they've done before. And it makes me laugh. It's a whole bunch of just silly things that people do all the time. It's wives getting back at husbands. It's neighbors doing your dog pooped on my yard, so I do this. It's like people taking internet passwords and stuff like that and going, well, that's why, ha ha ha, your internet history is so bad. So, but it's it's a hilarious account to follow. So that's become my main Twitter usage. I'm not going to lie. But you did bring up a lot of.
I don't do Twitter.
It's a lot of people say
I'm
it's
on
dead.
there.
It's a lot of people saying it's dead. I think there's going to be a resurgence. The man has been reinstated. Trump
is back. Yes, I know.
He has not rejoined.
Trump, Kanye.
He has
and
been.
Jordan Peterson have all been reinstated.
Peterson never got blocked, I don't think.
Did he? I heard he did, but I don't know. I don't know anything.
Yeah.
I try really hard to be as I don't want to be ignorant of things, but I guess I kind of think that Americans have PTSD, and I don't think that I know it seems silly, but when you think about the 24-hour news cycle and what's constantly being pumped into the news system, every time you turn on the television, you're being inundated with more traumatic scenes of things while also being told who's to blame, and who you're being told is to blame is not the person who's actually to blame. I remember, this is before I moved, but I remember being at a bar and I was out with my friends and we're just like chilling. And I used to go to biker bars because I'm a brave soul. And first off, they're really fun. But like I had this like one biker bar I love to go to. And I remember, because a biker bar is going to be Republicans. And I walk in and they know I'm not. And I mean, it was fine by the end of it, because like I usually went with one of my friends who was white, and so they accepted that I was her friend, therefore they accepted me, and soon we were all cool. But I remember being at the bar, sitting there having a drink, and looking up, and Fox News was on, and it was just the news, the actual news, where it's like weather and stuff like that. The news was on, and just seeing the Fox logo, I could feel my heartbeat go faster. Like I could feel me flushing. Like I could feel it. There was no audio. There was nothing happening on that screen that should have made me angry. But the sight of the logo raised my blood pressure. And I was like, this is not normal. This is not a normal response. And I'm kind of the mind that Americans are experiencing trauma, like from actual things that happen, perceived things are happening, being told that the bad things are happening to you are these people's fault, and then constantly being flushed with it. Like, this is the first time in history, because of the internet and because of the growth of the 24-hour news cycle, that people are exposed to this much bad stuff consistently. Before, you just had the newspaper and you could read it and put it down. Now it's on there's a news station. You can turn it when you wake up, you can watch the news, you can listen to the news on the way to work, you can get to work, play a podcast about the news, come home, listen on like it's 24 hours. So
more analysis,
I'm a firm believer that
more analysis, and it's all presenting itself as being the authentic truth sorts. And I think one of the things that even makes all this worse is the whole IP tracking and stuff like that, where if you Google, so I don't know if you use separate web browsers and incognito and other assisted connection devices that obscure your source, but I use a variety just so I can't have my one address tracked. Now, some people say it's tracked to your computer itself. I don't think so, but when you Google or when you internet search using one browser, it learns what you do, and it only presents things that you are most likely to click on. And that feeds you into that same. Facebook got in trouble for this. That was the whole Cambridge Analytics, where they were selling this. And one of the issues that Facebook was just serving people ads that were aligned with what they were searching for. And so it was this massive data tracking, and makes this whole 24-hour news cycle even worse. It just puts it on steroids almost.
Yeah. And when you think about how the brain works, like, how many times have you heard something once and been like, okay, that's poppyhock, but heard it 3 or 4 times and then and all of a sudden you've heard it 1 billion times and it becomes a fact in your brain. Even if it's not, you just hear it enough times that you believe it's true and you don't even remember where you learned it. And that happens to all of us. So if that happens with normal stuff, imagine what that's like to be constantly inundated with information like that. It's not healthy. So I don't want to know everything. I have been so at peace being unplugged.
There are some people who say that in 10 years, it's going to be newspapers again. We're all going to go back to newspapers.
Maybe I can make money printing, and I'll be able to send them in my poems, and they'll print them and send me $5.
You'll probably have your own newspaper, because it's going to be so cheap. Paper is going to be so cheap in 10 years because no one's going to be buying it, because it'll be like one of those dirty forms or whatever. But so then you're saying that you don't follow the news very much, and we live in China, and do you follow Chinese news at all? Well, nothing.
Nope.
How's your Chinese?
No.
Do you read the Chinese news?
No, my Chinese is terrible, and no.
Nothing.
Nope.
Wow.
Nope.
That's why you're happy.
I know. Yes, it is. My friends tell me the stuff that's urgent for me to know, and I know it's terrible to depend on my friends like that. But first off, I don't read Chinese, so there's that. And 2, I live here, so I'm a foreigner in a country that doesn't necessarily want me. I don't need to leave here angry. Like, that's just going to impact my relationships. God, this tea is making me burp. It's going to impact my relationships with people.
I agree. I have noticed every time that I go online and I read the Twitters and the other sources, and if it's ever Western based, you just leave disgusted, and it just makes you just downtrodden. Whereas I found that if I read the Chinese news, I'm a little happier. Like, it's very much more upbeat. They do take a lot of knives to American, like, policy and stuff like that. Very, very straightforward talk about, well, the United States has forgotten about this little thing, and going, wow, okay, didn't even know that happened. But it's not
Americans
as
the worst. We do awful things.
and it's still the biggest market and economy and cultural behemoth in the world, isn't it? Yeah. So I mean,
I love my country, but I'm also aware that it does awful things.
Are you?
Two of those things can be true at the same time.
Have you ever thought about rejecting your American passport?
Absolutely not. No, never, ever. No way.
All right. Why not?
I don't know. I don't try to have a whole lot of nationalism, but I'm very pleased with the strength of that passport. I have zero interest in getting rid of it. No. No. Nope.
Oh, fair enough.
Like I think the only way I wouldn't even reject it. Like I guess if I could find a Brit to marry, so I could have like those two passports, I'd be good. Right. But no, there's no way I'd get rid of mine. not a chance.
Well, I see this guy who's big onto politics. One of his, and he's not the only one. And this is very much again going with the difference between Canadians and Americans. There is a huge push in some expat, nomadic expat American circles where they want to get away from the long reach of the United States arm. And typically, it's not even just like the culture or whatever it is. It's the tax man. They're all like, I don't want that IRS coming after my money. I work for it. It's my money. And you're going,
yeah.
I guess that's hard to argue with that one. But that seems to be the big thing is they want to.
I don't make enough money for the IRS to come for me. I think if I was making over 100,000, I could see that argument, but I'm not. So I'm good. So now I'm good.
Yeah. Now to be fair, I've been saying how Americans are doing this and that. Most countries, you rock on up and you go to the local bar or you find a podcast or some event, and 9 times out of 10, if it's not an Australian, it's going to be an American. So there is that push. It is I don't know what happens in your country, but there is a push to produce ideas and do stuff anywhere that Americans go. Have you seen this at all, like in your travels? I can't just be me, can it?
I haven't traveled that many places, so I guess that could just be my lack of experience. But I believe you. It sounds something like us being willing to tell the entire world how to think. That sounds like us.
I don't know if
think like
having
me,
a
I'm right.
pub is telling the world how to think, other than having a drink isn't going to kill you.
I know I'm teasing, but no, that sounds like us. I think that collectively we're pretty entrepreneurial, so I could see that. I think that's woven into the if it's accessible to you, I think it's woven into the narrative. So
yeah,
I could see it.
With your events, and we touched on it, but we haven't really got into the nitty gritty. So you like your podcast and your blog and your podcast are very different in this regard, in a lot of ways. In that your blog is, I would say, a lot more like creative writing and creative publications in that way. But your podcast, you deal with a lot more social issues, Black history. We're on Men's Month now, which I've told people, men, don't forget to go get your doctor to stick the finger up the pooper. Women's history. Yeah. You recently did suicide awareness. There was another one I thought that you had covered as well.
Probably.
Those are the 4 that came up. What has pushed you into this, to look at these issues, to broadcast about them, and then continue the dialogue and expose the dialogue here in China as well?
Well, the Women's History Month calendar was the first calendar I ever did. And I think it was just kind of, hey, let's talk about this stuff. I wanted to know more. And I was like, well, I'll do this research and I'll tell people about it and we can learn together. And then after that, it just kind of became, what other issues do I feel like we need to talk about? I'm very keen on not being pigeonholed. So I don't want anyone to ever be like, oh, this is feminism, or this is like only Black people, or only for people who like, we are not one-dimensional people. We're not one-dimensional creatures. So the idea that there's only one thing that matters to us is farcical. So I kind of want to promote anything that could impact someone or could help someone. A lot of the issues impact me directly because I'm looking up stuff, but some stuff is just for others. Like, I'm not a man, but I do believe we should talk about men's health. Like, I have male friends. I love them. I have a brother. I don't want anything bad to happen. So, like, it's about being able to connect and raise awareness, but also the understanding that if we talk about these things, the conversations become less taboo. Like, the suicide one was a bigger one because it was kind of, I had planned on doing an episode for that like a couple of years ago, and it was so hard. It was so hard. I did the research for it, and it was depressing. Like, the statistics, I didn't anticipate them. Like, I went in with this preconceived notion of who was at most at risk for suicide, and it blew my mind that it was white men in their 40s, like late 30s, 40s, early 50s, like this like 20-year bracket. Blew my mind. And I was like, really? But because when at least in America, when we talk about suicide, we're always talking about teenagers. They're one of the smallest groups that commit suicide. Now, I understand, because if you're like 16, 17, you haven't lived. So it's a huge deal. Don't die. But it's crazy to think that people in their 40s, we're not even addressing it. We're just like, well, I mean, it's bad. Don't do it. But, and I guess I just found out that on Sunday that Frank, the guy from Power Rangers.
The Green Power Ranger. Yeah.
Yes.
I can't. Frank is his last name. I know. He got divorced a couple months ago. Apparently.
Jason Frank.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
but like,
they didn't say why he died, or at least the reports didn't say, but highly suspect that it wasn't an accident.
Yeah, somebody mentioned that they believed it was suicide, and I was like, but he's in the bracket. Like, he's in that age bracket, and we just don't talk about it. We do not talk enough about the real life impacts of this and what it's like, and because we don't talk about it, when people have those thoughts, they don't share them. And I feel like that's something I don't like. I don't like the idea that you believe you suffer in silence. I've said this many, many times, but the cruelest trick your mind plays on you is that you are by yourself. It is the cruelest trick it plays. It's absolute poppycock. You are not alone. There are very few things that are happening to you specifically and have never happened to anyone else in the history of existence. Very few. So the idea that you can become so convinced that no one can understand you, that you shut yourself off, a lot of that just comes from us not talking about things. So I guess I want to try to normalize conversations about difficult topics and also raise awareness. The Black history stuff is also because I got really sick of people talking about Black history. And I wanted to talk about it because I get tired of the trauma porn that is the slavery, when we trap out the slavery thing. I mean, it's important and we should talk about it, but there's so much more to my culture than just that one thing. So
your connection got a little, or my connection got a little gummy there. So you were talking about,
sorry.
We got most of that. Where it cut out was towards the end of your talk about suicide awareness. And we got the first bit of the Black History Month as well, or Black History.
Oh.
It did get the Green Power Ranger in there as well. You're right. It is not talked about, especially amongst, I think, I'm not sure if it was your group or maybe you share. I can't remember. There was a video on TikTok or whatever of a woman dancing, very happy. And then the caption read, "This was 24 hours before she killed herself." And it was like, how shocking that is that,
Okay.
so there was this video
I lost you for a second, but I think you're back.
Okay. All good?
Okay. Are you there? Okay, cool.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. You're blurry, but I can hear you.
This video that was on social media had this woman who was dancing and seemed very happy. And then the caption under it said that this was 24 hours before she committed suicide. And it's one of those things where you're kind of like, that's kind of disturbing. And it also kind of makes me look at my own actions, like how people can seem to be very good on the outside, but then on the inside, they might be dealing with things that either people don't think they're susceptible to, or that they don't want to talk about with everybody, but they would talk about with somebody. and maybe they don't even know how to do that, because especially amongst men, I mean, you don't hear, dude, how you feeling? How are you feeling these days? There's none of that. There's beers and like, offhanded, things are okay, work sucks, this, that, blah, 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 and then move on sort of thing. But it's not talked about very much. Are you finding the same reception here in China for a lot of these issues that you talk about? Or because it seems like almost that your podcast and everything is facing the West and it doesn't face inside of China.
Yeah.
But your events are in China.
Yeah.
Are you finding reception within Beijing and the country?
My events are pretty well received, mainly because there are a lot of poetry stuff, but my events are pretty well received. I do think that it doesn't really matter if it's in China or out. Some topics are just hard to talk about, period. But I think that for the most part, it's been well. But I also, so it's mainly English, native English, or people who speak English. They don't have to be native English speakers, but it tends to be received more by English speakers. But I think they've been taken pretty well. The podcast does face West. So it's kind of, when I do the podcast, I'm in a different brain, I think, because like in real life, I'm not always nice. But on my podcast, I try to be as compassionate and understanding as possible. Because like I said, I believe that Americans suffer from PTSD, and the last thing you need is somebody else yelling at you. So I try to come from a different place so that we can try to connect on things. I do get a little antsy and aggressive, but I try not to do that too much. Whereas in person, I am all of those things. But yeah, no, I think they've been pretty well received and well appreciated. A lot of people who don't talk in the podcast group chat, a lot of them don't talk in the group chat, but I'll get messages whenever certain things happen, like the Suicide Awareness Month. People would message me to tell me that they couldn't make it and why, or like afterwards they'd message me about their stories. And I'm not going to lie, it was kind of hard because I'm not a therapist. So a lot of people would send me their stories and I had to find a place to hold that. I had to be able to carry it. And that was not easy. But I'm a firm believer of if I sign up for this, I am also signing up for this, for part of the extra that's going to come with it. So I did my best to carry what I could. But I think they're necessary. So even if it's not sold out seats, like the play was sold out, even if nothing else I do is sold out, I wouldn't stop doing it because I think it's necessary.
How do you shoulder this burden, this responsibility? Because you probably hear, I mean, I don't get very much feedback in terms of like, oh, dude, this, that. I do get, Steve, maybe you shouldn't talk about stuff sometimes. You should be a little bit more, or when someone notices that I've maybe had a beer or two. But how do you deal with the fact that other people are now seeing you, that people see you as someone that they can talk to about these issues and that they can confide in you as well? How do you deal with it?
The best I can. It is a beautiful, it's a blessing and a curse. Because it's wonderful to feel that people feel comfortable talking to you about stuff. It is. It's also hard because I have my own trauma I have to carry, and then people are asking me to carry theirs. But it's also hard because I might not have the response they need, which is why I usually point people towards actual resources like counseling or peer support, because I'm not equipped to give them the tools they need. This came up like a couple of months back. Somebody was talking about, they told their friend something, and then their friend didn't respond in the way they wanted, and then all of a sudden it was, oh well, that person's not a good friend, and that person's this, and so I had to hop in and be like, or they don't have the skills to carry. Like, I understand that we want our friends to know everything about us, but that's kind of selfish because you don't know what your friends have been through. So asking them to hold your trauma for you is a big deal. And not everybody can. So just because somebody can't carry it, that doesn't mean they don't love you. That doesn't mean they don't care about you. It just means that they can't carry that with you. It doesn't mean that they're someone who can't. Try to point people to people who can carry it, if I can't, and then just try to be a sympathetic ear.
The connection did glitch, but we got a lot of that with the people are. It's asking a lot to put it on a friend and then have them, if they don't respond in the way that you feel like they should, it kind of, I don't know if it makes them anxious, but it sort of puts everybody in a weird position because you're going, well, what do you want me to say? Like, because especially if they haven't gone through similar experiences, it's very difficult. I, for one, know that I'm a very bad therapist. I think you've noticed me posting in the group daily reminders or weekly reminders to do pull-ups and go for runs.
I thought that was hilarious because I'm never going to do a pull-up. So every time I see it, I laugh. I'm like, no. And I'll go eat a brownie.
Brownies are, I was thinking about making them tonight since we got locked down. But I have found that running, of all things, if I ever feel anxious, any sort of anxiety, that one has been, like, it doesn't even have to be like a full bore run. I mean, we're talking just like jogging. Because people are asking me, like, because I work out quite a bit now, and people are like, why do you do this? And I go, honestly, I don't think I could deal with half the stuff that goes on here. And like, it distracts me from so much. And it gets me out there. It used to get me outside until today when I apparently got locked down, but who knows? Maybe I'll lose my mind this week. Maybe this will be the ultimate test. Hope not. I have a pull-up bar in my room though, so I have that covered. But I've noticed that physical exercise, not only has it helped the anxiety, but it's also stopped me from doing other things such as drinking, which I found was, although it's fun to think that drinking can help, you look back at it, a lot of those instances, you're kind of going, I could have saved the money, could have saved the time, could have saved the embarrassment, and probably could have better conversations over WeChat in 2 or 3 sentences rather than complaining about work for 3 hours at the bar sort of thing. So I found that running has done wonders for issues, my own sort of health as well, for both mental and physical. With your work, you also, because you've done suicide awareness, women's history, Black history as well. Is this something that you're bringing into China as well, that you talk about in, because you do mostly poetry readings, at least the last couple have been, but are you talking about racial divisions and these issues here in China as well?
I steer clear of China stuff because we're in China and I do not believe in shitting where you sleep. So I try to avoid issues like that. I mean, I've got plenty of stories about stuff I don't care for that's happened, but I try to steer clear of the racial stuff that happens in China because I live here and do not want to get deported.
All right.
That's basically the real talk.
With your podcast, because I've listened to a few episodes, and I actually thought it was very, very interesting. And going back to the policy, because there was, I wrote it down. I think I didn't know. I listened to one where you're talking about, what was the man who got shot? He got shot and he was falsely accused. And it's happened a couple times. I've lost you. No, we've lost you. Lost you.
One who got what? If I turn on my Veep.
Yeah.
Okay. Wait. Okay. There, you're moving again.
Okay. Good.
Okay.
All right.
Okay,
So.
There
Yes.
you're moving. Okay. What's
good? Is the Veep off? It might work better without that.
Actually, I turned it off before, and so I just had to turn it back on.
Oh, really?
So,
okay. My assisted connection device is off, so I think it works best for that.
Yeah. It's not like it's moving, so I don't know what that's all about. So I don't know.
Okay.
There's zero movement on here, so who knows?
All right. Well, we'll watch it. So I was listening to your podcast, and there was one episode where you did go, because you mentioned policy. Now, we were talking about policy before, and you did there's a couple episodes for, was it Black History Month or Women's History Month, that you were talking about. There was a black
sorry.
man, I think. Oh, you sent me hearts. Oh, thank you.
I don't know how to work the internet. We've talked about this. I am very much still in 2010. I don't know how to work the internet.
That's good. I mean, you sending people hearts who listen to your podcast. That's good. That's good for listener accrual, gaining listeners. So these
Anyway.
some of the cases that you talk about in on your podcast, you do go into quite a bit of the depth of the history and the issues surrounding it. So like there again, we talked about the issues, the trend issues, but then you talk a lot about sort of the historical ties that bind, sort of thing, that hold things back. How much of this information did you know before you started, and how much did you learn because you're like, oh, I actually don't know all that much, so I have to read more about and fill in the blanks or whatever it is?
It depends on the topic, because there are a lot of things that are, I don't want to say part of the Black household, but kind of part of the Black household. So a lot of things I knew that I might have gone back to verify, because, people tell you stuff. But it kind of depends on, I'm not sure which episode you're talking about, because I did quite a few of those. But
you were counting the days, and there was one in particular that stood out. It was about a man who got shot after being falsely accused of either not assaulting but harassing a woman in a store, and it came out later.
That sounds like Emmett Till.
That's the one.
Yeah, that was a little boy. He was about 14. So Emmett Till was the linchpin. He's the kindling that sparked the civil rights movement. So his help, so he's from Illinois. So within Illinois, especially within the Black communities in Illinois, we all know who he is. But when I moved to Arizona, I realized people had never heard of him, and it blew my mind.
Neither does the Canadian in Beijing, apparently.
And that's, I understand you not, but because it was so, we talked about it in school, not a lot, but it was mentioned in school. It was very clear. We discussed it, and I remember my grandparents talking about it. And then when I just traveled, like a handful of states over, like to the West Coast, and I was talking to one of my white friends, and they'd never heard of him. And I was like, what? And then I spoke to other people, they'd never heard of him. And it just blew my mind that even within the same country, we're just not all being given the same information. And it was just mind blowing. But it went both ways, because there are things about Arizona and the history in Arizona I had no idea about. So some stuff I do have to look up, but a lot of stuff, like at least the nuts and bolts of it, like the core, I know, because part of it is just part of our history, part of the oral tradition that we carry down, and we have to warn our children about and stuff like that. So yeah, like I remember being told about Emmett Till when I was in legit grade school. So yeah.
So it is a huge issue, the racial divide, and it exists in Canada with the First Nations and the white settlers and the colonists. And I know that Canada has done, like Justin Trudeau, the current prime minister, he's done a lot of work in a seeking resolution, or there's sort of what's the word? Paying back.
Reparations?
That's the word.
It's okay.
They talk about the treaties, the deals, how they've been violated, and they now part of sort of like for all the big sporting events. As far as I know, they have to declare what land they're on.
Oh.
So they do. So if the American team is visiting, the Canadian national anthem, American national anthem, and they also state what treaty or what land area that the game is being played on. How long can it ever be resolved? 10 years, our generation, our lifetimes, because this is one of these things that it's said to be the original American sin is slavery.
I'd say the genocide of the Native Americans trumps us in terms of original sin, but it's a close second. Um, oh,
Going forward, like how can we go forward? I mean, given that, I mean, we live in Beijing, I'm far away from this as well, and we've both
yeah,
talked about not going back to our hometowns. Like,
yeah,
um,
yeah.
at what point, like, because if we are still talking about these things, and I don't know what would happen if I went back to Canada, to tell you the truth, and like how different my life has been here in China, and then going back and not being aware of all the issues that have happened and like what has been settled and what hasn't been settled.
Yeah.
I don't know. This would be new to me. What do you see happening?
See, part of the reason why I don't want to go home is every time I go home, I want to run for office. And then I'm like, nope, time to go. Literally what happens. I'm like, I get this like, we have to do something about this. I'm going to run for, okay.
What office would you run for?
Oh, I don't know. When I was younger, I used to always want to be governor because that's a weird dream for a teenager to have. But I did. I wanted to be governor or a senator. That's two different things. Governors are cool because they are the most powerful person for the state, but senators make more money and they are more respected. But it's also harder to become a senator. But yeah, it's like I don't know, man. How long would it take to resolve? It would take multiple lifetimes. And is that possible to resolve? Yes, if we put education above all things. I think that part of what's wrong with the world, my country, no exception, is that we just don't know enough about each other. We don't know enough about the history. Like part of why when I talk about, I think I did an episode on George Floyd. I did an episode for voting and Georgian voting rights when we like a couple years back. But a lot of those things I do exactly what I told you about earlier, where I take the issue and then I go deeper to explain the historical context behind said issue. Because a lot of that people don't know. And America is so different because you can go one state over and have a completely different set of rules. And people don't know that from other countries. So a lot of times I'll have people who will be foreigners for me. It's like people from Europe or Canada who have this idea of what America's like based off of what New York is like or what California is like. But each state makes its own, or Chicago, but each state makes its own rules. So the rules in my state could be drastically different or are drastically different than the ones in Alabama.
How different?
It depends.
Do you have an example? Because you're right. I have no clue, but this also stems again, going back to my childhood. I never ever talked about moving one province over to live there.
It's cool. It's cool.
So I never, neither did I ever think of moving to Minneapolis or anything.
Yeah.
It was just wasn't part of the conversation. So how different, because I guess I kind of think, I wonder if I were to go do a road trip through the States,
Mm-hmm.
What major trespassing could I somehow do going from one state to another?
All right, let's talk. Let's talk guns because that's America's biggest thing. Let's talk guns. So if you have a license and have a registered weapon and you carry it, depending on the state you're in, determines whether or not you can transport it over the borders. So you can register your gun in one state, drive through a state that does not have open carry and be arrested. And that actually happened to someone where her gun was registered in the state she lived in and the state she was moving to. She got pulled over in between.
Yeah.
And in that state, she was violating laws. Therefore, she was arrested. You talk about drugs, same difference. It can be legal because it's not federally legal. When stuff is not federally legal, it varies from state to state. So, which is why abortion is such a huge deal, because depending on the state, you got a problem. So like for pot, if you're in a state that says it's legal for you to smoke or have so much, then you travel to a state where it is not legal at all. You get pulled over, you're arrested, and depending on the state determines the charges. California, very open with pot. You can open your own business. You can have a pot store. You move over a state or two, and then you can't. So you can have people doing the exact same thing in two separate states, and one person gets a felony.
And they could be just traveling, like moving shop from California to the other state, just en route.
They can't.
And they get pulled over.
They can't. So like if you sell pot in California and then you move it, having it in that state can be illegal. So exactly.
Fun. It seems like it's a lottery.
I mean, it's not if you know where you're going and you know what you're doing, but no, it's not. You definitely can't ship it on a plane. And then when you talk about things like don't do it. When you talk
sorry,
about
officer,
things like,
I can't take it through I can't take it on the highway. They'll arrest me. I was going to take it through the airplane.
Do not do that. That's because then you're violating federal law, and that's worse. And that's the other part. When you cross state lines, it stops being a state law and becomes a federal crime.
Federal, right. And so how much worse, because this comes up quite a bit, especially when it's seems like it's racially motivated as well. Like when there's the cops and minorities involved, they get picked up on these things and it becomes a federal issue. How much worse is it in terms of like the state and then the federal gap?
It depends what we're talking about. If we're talking about sentencing, it depends on what state you're in. Some states have 3 strike rules. Some states don't. Some states have some like.
This seems like it's overly complicated.
It is horribly complicated. And depending on the crime. So Arizona, when I lived in Arizona, drinking and driving in Illinois, I'm pretty sure is a misdemeanor. Meaning slap on the wrist up till 15 years, depending on what happens or how many times. Drinking and driving in Arizona is a felony, which carries more time and more weight, and they absolutely have to be reported to your employer when you apply for jobs. You should report misdemeanors too, but it's so much worse if you get caught on a felony. Also, depending on your state, if you have a felony, you cannot apply for social services, such as food stamps. So let's say you get caught up on a DUI, or like if you have any sort of drug-related offense, you would not be able to apply for services such as food stamps, even if you become homeless later. So, like there's tied into so many other things that it's like it's not this tiny little thing where it's like, oh, well, it's the same everywhere. It's not, which is why when we have issues like abortion, which is a huge issue, it becomes a problem. Because let's say one state, because they already have, says it's illegal to have an abortion after a certain point. Then, okay, I'll leave here. I'll go to this state to get it where it's legal. But if they also make it illegal for me to leave the state to get one, because when I come back, I have committed the crime, then I am arrested. And I can be charged with, depending on how they worded it, a felony based off of crossing state lines. It's like it's crazy. It's not just like it's the same everywhere. It's really not. And the degree to which it can be different is night and day. Night and day. Like, I don't know if you ever watched the movie The Green Book. It's not a great movie. I liked it, but like it's not like the best movie. But there actually was a such thing for us called The Green Book, where it was basically a pamphlet that Black people could get that told us which states, which areas had hotels that were safe for us to stay in the South. Mm-hmm. Because I mean, it's very useful, but but the laws are different. It's not just the laws; the enforcement of the laws are different. So maybe it's illegal to do something everywhere, but maybe one area enforces it more than others, or maybe they only enforce it on one group of people. So it's night and day different. It's not like, I wish it was less, but it's not as huge. The differences are drastic, which is why people want federal protection for things, because then states, via our Constitution, states cannot make laws that contradict the federal law. So if there's a federal protection, then a state can't make a law that goes against that. They can only make laws that clarify it, but they cannot make laws that directly go against it. So overturning. What
do you mean by clarify it?
So like
this sounds like another way of getting around a federal law.
Correct.
Oh,
correct. Correct. So abortion was always kind of an iffy federal protection anyway, because it was based off of privacy, and there's no privacy implicitly stated in the Constitution. There's no right to privacy. Because there's no right to privacy. Exactly. They kind of had to create a area for it to fit in. And the problem is that is what they ruled. That's what they said was unconstitutional, because there's nothing that specifically says then it should be up to the states, which is constitutional. State says if it's not in the constitutional, then it's a state right. Because America was founded as a states' rights country.
Right.
So federal government was supposed to be small, states' rights. It was a different country in its creation. The Constitution supports that idea of the country. So it doesn't have. So if something's not explicitly outlined in the Constitution, states have the right to make laws about it. It's just it's a mess.
I'm not sure if Canadians listening to this are kind of going, good thing we didn't join them. I mean, I don't, but I mean, we have our own issues as well.
It's crazy technical.
There's two things that come to mind in your great summary of the current legal matrix that is the United States.
That was a lot of words. I'm sorry.
That first of all, that whole like the federal, and then you have the state laws, and you can do this and that. That actually reminds me of stock trading quite a bit and futures trading, because if there's any one thing that I will admire the United States and New York and Chicago for, it is their ability to make money on something. You can buy and sell calls or options, futures, stocks, ETFs, you name it. They have monetized it, and you can trade it. And now it makes sense why.
Oh, well.
Number two, number one economic center in the world. Very hard to argue with those numbers and the dollars going through it. So then this makes me wonder, and I'm sure this conversation, this topic has come up before. Is the Constitution outdated? Does it need to be redone? Can it be redone? I mean, as an American,
that is blasphemy.
As an American expat, you probably have an opinion of it. As a Canadian, I hear people talk about Constitution. It's not in the Constitution, but I can't help but think, again, that Constitution was a couple hundred years ago. Is there a time, and we live in a country that decided to restart itself, could that happen in the States?
Ooh. All right. I'm going to answer that. I'm going to answer that question this way. The Constitution has been outdated since it was created.
Okay. Wow.
Now, I love part of when I wanted to go into politics was because I admired the longevity of the Constitution. It's an expertly written document to have lasted as long as it had. However, even when it was created, it was phrased and crafted in a way to put off problems for future people to deal with. So I obviously they're dead and I can't ask them, and I'm Black and a woman, so they wouldn't listen to me anyway. But I doubt the founding fathers expected that document to be as revered the way it is presently. I mean, even things like impeachment, when they created it, they expected it to be used more often. It's not
what. How often can we impeach people?
But think of Europe or like England, or I don't know about Canada as much. Did you guys can do referendums? Referendums, right? You guys can you can do votes of no conscience, right?
No confidence. Votes of no confidence.
No confidence, right? Yeah. No confidence. I know the UK can. We can't do that. So that was kind of our version, because there's no way for the people to do that. So that was kind of what that was supposed to symbolize, was the idea is that the House, which is supposed to be representative of the people, would be able to do a vote of no confidence. And that's kind of what our impeachment system was designed to model. So it's just kind of what we've done to it is we've deified it. And because we've deified it, I don't know that we can undeify it without breaking the country.
Okay.
It's kind of what happens. Like even when we think about our founding fathers, they are gods. It's like they are the equivalent of Zeus and the pantheon. Like they are gods. They did no wrong. The wrongs they did are excusable because they just didn't know We're not allowed to talk about the bad things they did. And that creates barriers between conversations, which then creates barriers between change. So I don't see it. I hope for a time where we are able to address the fact that it is outdated. Because I mean, even in things of who was allowed to vote, when the Constitution was written, it was only white men who owned property, which was not a lot of white men. Most white men did not own property. They were leasing, or they were working for people who owned property. They were sharecroppers. So it's this concept of, it was very much, my friends and I were talking some years back, where I was like, the U.S. has always been an oligarchy. And they were like, no, it hasn't. I was like, the difference is, at one point in time, the people with the most money also were the smartest. That is no longer the case. Now you can have money and not be smart. That is new.
Yeah.
Because before, people were also, the people with the money had advanced educations, had traveled all over the globe. And that's just not the case anymore. So I don't, like, I would love for it to be addressed. I just don't see it, but that I've been wrong before. So that did not answer the question, but
there's one guy, is he a theorist? He runs geopolitical futures, and anyone who's listened to my podcast is like, oh, he's still going on about this guy, heavily political. Created this sort of think tank intelligence, a private, not intelligence like CIA, but like a research company. And he has published a book. George Friedman is this guy's name. And he writes that this decade of the United States fits in with some 80-year cycle that keeps on popping up. And that with all the issues that we've been talking about here, especially the Constitution, that the next decade especially is going to be a huge test for the United States. But that, and one thing that I like that he says, that the United States system is not threatened, unlike some other places around the world their system is threatened by upheavals of the sort that you see in the United States. So this next 10 years, I'm asking you, what's going to happen in 10 years? I mean, all right, when you become governor in 10 years, I mean, this podcast is going to come out. I mean, what
they're
could
gonna be like,
change?
"Remember
I mean,
10 years ago, she said."
What could change in 10 years? Like, I mean,
A
because
lot.
I kind of think like back 10 years, we were talking about how the internet has changed,
Yeah.
and how that's
Yeah,
changed
a
a
lot.
lot of things. So in 10
Yeah.
years, how much more will we still have the same issues? Will some things sort of be like, okay, we can't deal with this now, and we'll rewrite the Constitution so the next generation can deal with it?
I don't know. Kicking the ball down. It's very, we're all very good at, like, let's make this somebody else's problem. I don't know, because I mean, whoever that guy is, I'm sure he's more knowledgeable than me. So I don't want to tell him he's wrong or tell you that I think he's wrong. I don't actually know that. In terms of 80-year cycles, I can kind of see what he's referring to, but I kind of feel like there are a couple of things that have happened that have made that less in like a predictable thing. The internet being one of them, because beforehand, people didn't have access to information as fast.
Mm-hmm.
And now the information that they have access to doesn't have to be true. So I don't know. I could definitely see this next 10 years being a test. I don't know that I believe our system isn't threatened. I mean, we just had a president deny the election, and then we had a bunch of other people that ran on the grounds of election denying, and that is one of the cornerstones of us. So if we can't even agree that an election is fair, and so I don't know.
I will on the January 6th thing. Again, this is one of the reasons why I admire the United States, is that the system is still in place, even though a president he was impeached. Then he lost the election. He said, no, I didn't. And then a whole bunch of people ran into like the seat of the government and said, we're not taking this. What a beautiful country. I mean, that you can go do that. Where else can you do that and still live?
I mean, you can't do that. That is definitely treason.
And how many treason accounts were actually came as a result of that? I'm not sure. They haven't been talked about.
Not a hot. See, we're very iffy to call things treason that are treasonous.
Oh, because the United States is all anti-tyranny.
That's true, and because the treason carries the death penalty, and that's kind of a hot button issue for us. So the insurrection I'm of two minds. Definitely always both minds say that was bad. But one mind goes, this is not unusual. It's the first time that they've done it in DC, but It is not the first time that a bunch of angry white people with guns have taken over a Capitol building. Like, it's not like legit. Just Google a state. It's not even, because what happens, maybe like a year before, there was it the pipeline situation? There was something where people got mad. They marched on their state capitol with guns and just kept it for 3 days. So like that's the and which is what made me laugh a bit about everybody flipping out about DC. I'm like, but they've marched on state capitals.
No one cared.
So like this was not a giant surprise. Y'all were just like, oh, they won't do it to us. Like, well, why not?
They
like,
did.
You didn't stop them in. Like, so it's not. I mean, the insurrection I did not view as a threat to my system because it brings me back to that whole right to bear arms foolishness. But the reality is, the U.S. government has far stronger weapons than most individuals do. Therefore, I'm not overly worried about a hostile takeover like via that way.
Right.
My concern about our system is things like election denying, because what makes most systems strong is people's belief in them. If you lose faith in your system, then you have civil unrest, and you don't know who to turn to for protection. And that's when stuff gets crazy. That's kind of the markers of the 60s and 70s, mainly 60s. But I find that to be more of a threat to our system. The election denying, having presidents be like, this didn't happen, they're lying to us. I feel like that's more of a threat than people trying to overthrow the government, because they have tanks and drones, y'all. I mean,
hard to fight against a tank when you got a stick.
I mean, I'm not sure what you think your like horde of weapons is going to do to a tank, but sure.
Yeah. Well, I guess one of the things with the United States is that there is a litigious system that is in place, because we were talking about this policy that there is it's not the state system isn't like other places where there's sort of you do have social shaming on like social media. But one of the big things that the state system sort of almost thrives upon is being able to sue people and also to tax them. Because if someone doesn't sue you, then the tax man just shows up and starts, okay, we're going through your tax records. And that is a pain in the ass as well. No one likes the IRS.
Right.
So, I mean, there's other sort of checks and balances in the state system that I as a foreigner, and as much as I know and don't know about taxes, and I don't know much about the United States tax system, that seems to be one of those common sort of, if we can't make it public, then we'll just do it sort of on the other side sort of thing. So, and the state system has that in place.
That's how we got Al Capone. That's how we got Al Capone, I think, was on taxes, tax evasion. So, yeah,
Didn't he have an accountant working for him?
I guess not.
Well, I've heard people say that the United States dollar is going to go to nothing and that gold is going to replace. And I was like, I don't know if you.
No.
How?
No.
It's
first off, there isn't enough gold in the world for that to be a thing.
Yeah.
That realistically speaking, and that's part of what's wrong with the American currency is that we were gold backed, but we have more money than we have gold to back it. So there's no way to do that because there's not enough gold.
Well, and that created a whole bunch of other benefits, like credit cards with 0% interest. I mean, you can borrow money and spend it and not actually have it.
Actually, that was more. That was more in the 80s. The decentralizing, the changing of us from being gold back was actually Nixon, or right around
1973.
Nixon. Yeah, so that's not the credit card thing came later, but as a result of that, yeah. So
then, speaking of 10 years time, do you think you're going to be in China in 10 years time?
no, no, that's not. I hope not. Like, no. If in 2032 I am still here, I'm gonna need somebody to come explain to me wwhy. Because no.
What do you think would make you stay, and what do you think would sort
43?
of would push you out?
44? No. I mean, I keep wanting to go home all the time. I mean, because I feel like if we could go home, then being here would be less. But now it's kind of like every time I'm here, the more I want to go home, and it gets harder and harder because there aren't very many direct flights, or it's really expensive to leave, and it's not getting less expensive.
Yeah.
So when I leave, I'm gonna have to leave, and I can't keep going. Like I think it'll be almost 5 years before by the time the end of the year. But since I see my family, that's a long time.
Yeah.
And some people are like, oh, well, you can go and come back, and I mean, probably, but
not easy.
Financially, is it worth it? Is it like? So I could see that being a real driver. Outside of that, I think I'm just ready. Like I never planned on being here this long, which I know is the expat creed.
Well, so how long did you think you were going to be here for?
The plan was 2 years, man.
That's it.
But that was the plan. But I mean, I will acknowledge that I got here and then COVID. But yeah, like I mean, but I also know that's the expat creed. I'm only staying for a year, and then like 20 years later,
wife, kids, husband, partner, and kids.
Yeah. So but no, I think part of my situation this year is trying to figure out how to move my platform, or how I would make my platform, how to change it a bit so that I can leave. But yeah, so I don't know. Like,
but you mean like move your stuff online rather than which platforms? Are you talking your teaching or your podcasting, blogging?
The event stuff. Of all the stuff I'm doing, I like that the most. So trying to figure out how to move from point A to point B, but still keep that or create it someplace else without having to start from scratch. So, or figuring out a place where I could go, where I could just jump back in. Because yeah, like the events part, I like more than the podcasting, a bit more than the writing. So like I do it. It's fun. It's fun to be on stage. It's fun to be around people. It's fun to have those conversations. It's stressful, but it's fun. Yeah.
Do you think you could do what you're doing anywhere else? Like if you were to move back to the States, or if you were to Dubai? I mean, is this something that you think that because it almost sounds like it's a skills thing, like it's a transferable skills rather than like direct market access.
I could absolutely do it in the state if I picked a big city. So I could do this in Chicago for sure. St. Louis, depending on the market, but actually St. Louis might be easier and it'd be cheaper. St. Louis, yes. So I guess the States, if I'm in a big city, definitely. The issue becomes internationally. It depends on the country, what the country's situations are, how they feel about gatherings, what topics you can discuss. Like for LGBT month, I might want to do something, and depending on the country you're in, you can't. So like it's just kind of figuring out what the rules or societal norms are for different countries and what you can and can't do. I'm not trying to break any laws, but I would like to raise some awareness. I've got a thought that I share with people. As much as I am for educating the masses, because I do believe that if you know, you should share. I also believe in sharing responsibly, because I don't live here. I mean, I live here presently, but I'm not from here, and I can leave and I can go home. They can decide I'm out tomorrow and I'm on a plane. So if I spend all of my time trying to change this society, the truth is I'm not going to be the one who has to live with those changes. So being aware of the risks that imposes to the people who you're asking to take it on, and that you don't have to carry it. That was something that was a lesson I brought back with me from Liberia, is that sometimes you can have the best of intentions and do the right thing, but if you don't live there, so you're not actually on the front lines So pushing your agenda can have real life consequences.
Yeah.
So I kind of move in that space of awareness where it's like I want to raise awareness, I want to help, but I also don't want to unnecessarily cause friction that could lead to people being killed or like rejected from their community with no place to go, things like that. Because it's really easy to be like, well, you should believe what I believe because what I believe is right, and what I believe is right because I believe it, but I don't have to live with that.
Right.
But the reality is I can go home. So asking someone to adapt my faith or my ideals, knowing that I'm leaving them here to fend for themselves, is a lot.
Yeah, it's almost a little odd, and because in China we get called Uyghurwen, foreigners all the time, outside people, and this has bubbled up as a racial argument from time to time. The whole, what do you call a foreigner? Or is it racist to call them a foreigner? But there's things like this where and currently, given the current, I'm not sure if it's a constitution, but the Chinese social system, we cannot get passports and we cannot become citizens of China. Whereas any Chinese person could move to the United States, could move to Canada, become passport carriers, and dual at that, so they can be both. But as a result, I mean, we are sort of always separated, and there is always that extraction available to us. If not of our own accord, we have family going, get him out, get her out. They send the helicopters in and they take us out or whatever, right? No one's sending a helicopter after me. My mom was very clear about how that was going to happen.
Mine's like, just don't come back in a casket, please. I told her I'll have them ship an urn. It'll be fine.
My mom said, you're getting buried wherever you are. Like, oh, thanks.
I'll have them ship the urn. It'll be fine.
Yeah. So it's like we do have this sort of separation at all times where it's just like we are not here and we can talk about some of these issues. My thing has always been like, I thought it was funny talking about working on farms and then talking about, money and starting your own business and stuff like that. And there is sort of a push to work to start your own business in China. I mean, you have this as well, working with the events that you do, but working on farms. Chinese people do not want to work on farms. My interpretation of working on a farm is very different. Mine is backpacking through Australia or working with my uncle in Canada. It's not picking rice from a field in plus 30 weather with very little clothing on. So it's a little bit of a different experience. All right. Well, we have talked quite a bit. Oh, this is one thing. This is because this was on your podcast.
Okay.
Because you've said this, and this goes back to Black History Month, and how a lot of people, when they meet you, they say this, and I can say that I have never seen Gone with the Wind. And I was wondering, I'm going, why haven't I seen Gone with the Wind? Because I mean, it's one of these classic books, and I go, wait a minute, well, because my mom never let me watch it, and why didn't she let me watch it? Because there's a sex scene. There's several, I think, and there's a sex scene somewhere in there. And I remember when, like, my mom is very Catholic.
Not really.
Like, something sexual's in there, and she was like, "Nope, you're not watching this." I'm like, "Okay." So I've never seen Gone with the Wind, never ever. Now I'm gonna have to go watch it.
I mean, you should for historical reference. I'm like, what sex scene could you possibly be referring to? I got nothing.
I don't know. I hope I even got the right movie.
There's reference to spousal rape.
Okay, well, maybe that would be.
Yeah, there's like very clear reference to spousal rape. That's really the only thing I can think of.
Well, then maybe that would be what it was. Maybe my interpretation.
That could be it.
So it wasn't sex then. Okay, all right. Well, there you go. So I've got two major faux pas here. I've got the Constitution and a lot of historical. I've had a lot of corrections going on today.
Oh no, I'm trying to remember the movie. Like I'm trying to play at like X speed to go through it, and I can't think of a single area. Because like there is the only thing I can think of is
was Kevin Costner in that movie?
No.
Oh God!
Gone with the Wind is old.
God.
Old.
Yeah,
like
Steven, you fucked that one up.
Rhett Butler, and I'm sorry,
Oh,
Clark
yes,
Gable plays Rhett Butler.
Right.
So that's Clark Gable's like pre my grandma.
Wow.
So
Okay.
like, well, my
I'm,
grandma's 73, 74, I think. So
Okay, well,
yeah,
first,
like
I haven't seen Going to Win. Second, I probably have the movie wrong. Third of all, my mom did not let me watch movies that had any sort of those types of scenes back when I was a child. So a lot of these classic and all these old movies, I haven't seen some of them.
I don't know if I don't know. I don't know where I saw it for the first time. But yeah, it's an old. My reference to that was that a lot of Chinese people, and that's part of why Black History Month, I talk about it, was that's their reference for what slavery was like for Black people. And they don't understand. I had someone say this to me. I don't understand why you guys are so mad right now. You were very happy when slavery was happening. And I was like, what? Where did you get that? And she's like, well, in Gone with the Wind, she's so happy. And I'm like, oh. And that is the fuel for why I get so mad at American media now. Because I'll get into arguments with family members about like, I hate this movie, not because of the movie itself, but because that movie makes it here. And then that is the only reference that this whole people have for Black people. And I don't want that to be I don't need those questions. Like, I don't need that life. So yeah, that was, I had someone say that to me and it was mind blowing. And then it was like, so I mentioned it to another one of my Chinese friends and she's like, yeah. And I was like, no, no. Oh my God.
Was that better or worse
Why?
than not getting the sex scene right? Oh yeah. Well,
no.
because they probably didn't know, because I've had this too, where I remember when I first started traveling, just some of the assumptions because it's very hard to, especially pre-internet. It's a little bit easier now with YouTube and how easy it is to jump over certain firewall walls and stuff like that. But you're able to research a lot better than you were 15 years ago, 10 years ago. And I remember when I first started traveling, just some of the ignorance that I had, just did not fundamentally understand what was going on in other parts of the world. It makes me cringe, almost like sometimes I do today, sort of thing.
Fair. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess the only other question I had in terms of recommendations for all the things that we've talked about, where some books or movies or resources that we can point to, where can we find out more about these things?
Books, resources. I guess it depends on what the topic is. If we're talking about mental health, currently I've been on I'm going to say his name wrong. Gabor Mate. Yep, said it wrong. Gabor, I think, Mate. I've been on a kick for him. He's amazing. He's a doctor who specializes. He talks about trauma and its impact on the body, and addiction and how that impacts the body and stuff. So it depends on what you're looking for, what area of my podcast where you're like, you talked about this. What do you recommend? I've got books for which one?
You have, because you did actually do quite a few, because you had all these calendars. You're working with this calendar.
Got quite a few of those, yeah.
Women's history. Let's go women's history first.
All right, women's history book. It depends on because each book was different because it was about a different part of women's history or a different thing. If I was to tell someone to read one book from the calendar, I'm Black, so I'm probably going to go with the Black one. So probably Bell Hooks' Everybody is Feminist. Well, Feminism is for Everybody.
Okay.
I think that's a good one because before reading that book, I was very much on the Don't Call Me a Feminist, I'm Black. And I'm still kind of on the Don't Call Me a Feminist, I'm Black. But I have a better understanding as to why she said that. So I'd definitely recommend that one. For Black History Month, there were so many good ones. I think there's so many. They got so many good ones. I'm trying to think of titles. I'm seeing How We Fight for Our Lives.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
That one.
All right.
That one. How We Fight for Our Lives.
Do you have a list of these books on your? Because I couldn't find it on your website.
The calendar should be on there. But I can send you the calendars because the calendars has all the books on them. Because it was just one book a week. It was one book a week. So, but yeah, the calendars are pretty intense.
You read one book a week?
I did. And by read, I mean audiobook listen to.
Oh, okay.
Audiobook. Yes. There's no way I could read one book a week if I have to read it. So audiobook listen.
Half these books haven't been read yet.
Because I have to multitask, and I can do that.
Yeah, it's a little bit easier with audiobooks for sure.
Audiobooks, so great. Yeah, oh man, I have so far this year we are at 27 books. Yes, 27 books this year.
Oh,
the goal was 25, but I'm above goal, but not where I want it to be. So, but yeah, 27 books for the year.
That's pretty good. What various topics, or what have you been reading?
Oh, various topics. I kind of jump back and forth between different things. Some of it is, mental health. Obviously, the 8 from the calendars. Stuff about trauma, stuff about self-compassion. Some stuff that's just fantasy because I like stuff like that. I re-listened to a couple of books that I did not even count. And Patrick Ruff's book is like 24 hours of listening, and I didn't even count that. But I love him, so it's okay. It's fantasy. First book is called Name of the Wind, and it's really good. He's described as our generation's Tolkien. So my reading list goes, it depends on what's going on. I might read something about suicide or, politics or history or stuff like that. Usually it's about mental health. Those tend to be the books I'm the most interested in.
What history books are you reading?
Usually when I'm talking history, I'm talking non-date history. So more analytical. I'm trying to think of what's a good one. Like it's like history of things. I don't know if I have my book reading list on this computer. I do not have my reading list on this computer.
I do a lot of YouTube clips, and it's all lots of Joe Rogan interview clips and stuff like that. I
don't do a lot of Rogan.
Some of his stuff is interesting. Some of it's you're kind of like, all right, I don't know. I mean, that's why I feel like a lot of times I have to do the this. Some people can say it's a conspiracy theory, and some people would say it's not, because when there's podcasts like that out there, he entertains quite a few different views. But some of the people are kind of going, if this was a real conversation, I'm not sure if it would go that way, sort of thing. That and I've been busy with my own studies of my reading list has been forced upon me, so I have to follow a certain gauntlet at the moment. I'm reading a lot of ESL education, blah blah blah.
Oh yeah, actually I don't have any history books this time. I thought I did, but nope. It's mainly like histories of people. So there's one that was on the women's history book calendar, Heartberries, which talks about a Native American's her story, and it was really interesting to listen to. But yeah, there's a bunch of these, but I'd say overall they are about mental health. I think they're mainly about mental health. But yeah, like I've got the 4 agreements. Oh, I did put it on here because that makes sense. The Alchemist, I've re-listened to that.
That was a good book.
There are 27 books. There are 27 books on here, and 25 of them are new.
Wow. That's an insane reading list. I mean, you must have headphones on all the time.
I mean, I obviously took some breaks, but...
That's impressive.
Because some stuff looks like I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13... 14 books I have started and not finished. Oh, I finished that one. I can move that one up. So that's 28 books. I finished one and I can move it.
So is this a plan every year to finish 25 books, like one every 2 weeks, or is it like just a goal that you have?
Oh, my plan. Oh, hold up. What just happened? My plan is to grow each year. So last year I did 20 books. So this year is 25. Next year 30. I want to get to 52. So,
That's a lot.
I mean, I know you're, but like realistically, we've got like 6 weeks till the end of the year, and I can definitely get through at least 2 more books. So I might make it to 30 this year because I'm at 28. Yeah, I could totally make it to 30 before the year's up.
That's pretty neat.
So
So one of my I have 2 last questions. Of course, one is like where people can find you, but also with all this reading, how does this influence your podcasting, your writing, and then the events that you choose to hold here in Beijing?
oh well, the reading kind of I take something I'm interested in and then I read about it to make sure I'm still interested in it, and then I'm like, let's talk about this thing, so I can at least be informed about things. So I'd say it influences, but I do try to break it up. So it's not just always like self-care or stuff, because listening to stuff about trauma is hard because it's trauma. So I might throw in a couple of fantasy books to help smooth it over, give my brain a break. Because I'm trying to listen to Mattier's book now, and it's been hard because it's about trauma and you have to be in the right headspace to do it. So like there's one book I haven't finished that I started a couple of years ago, and it's about Buddhism, and it's like I've started it and I've had to restart it every time I start it because I just can't stay focused.
Which book is this?
Let me look for it. The 12 stages. Is it even on here? It's probably not even on there. It's probably not even on here because I know that I know I'm not going to finish it because I've got like a bunch of them that's like, oh well, maybe you'll finish, but I know I'm not going to finish this Buddhist book. Let me check Audible, because Audible is awesome. In progress. Buddhism. The Heart of Buddhist Teaching.
Okay. And why do you have to restart that one? Why is that one so difficult to get through?
It's because I want to absorb it. Like I picked it up because I was like, well, maybe Buddhism is more my thing. And so I wanted to like really absorb it, and it's hard to be in that place where I can, and it's also not easy. It's not easy like talking, so yeah.
Right. All right. So we've covered a lot. I think a lot of people who read more than I do will appreciate the book recommendations, and because a lot of writers as well. Are you part of the Spittoon Collective as well?
Yeah.
Okay. Cheers. I'm not. I'm a very outside person of all that. I don't go out very much anymore. It's all this podcasting has made me, and the recent shut-in. Now I'm closed in for sure.
You have an excuse. That's true.
Well, only 7 hours old. We've talked about a lot. Is there anything else that people need to know about? Is there anything that we've missed? I don't think so. We've done a pretty good job.
Pretty boring. So
what kind of what kind of podcast setup do you have there? What microphone?
This is a Shure.
Sure. Which one?
That's an excellent question. I don't remember. I have to look it up on Talbot. Senti. I don't remember. But that sounds right. That one sounds right. SM7B.
You got a nice microphone.
I had a crappy microphone, and on my first couple of podcast episodes, first season, you can hear like the microphone randomly cutting out. It was choppy.
Was it the computer fan? I think it was the computer fan, because I was listening to going, is that my computer, or it's not mine, is it?
Yeah, because it's like, and part of it was like the computer fan, and then like I was very new to figuring out how it works. I should probably go back and clean that up.
Nah, don't bother. Leave it as it is. But you've also got you got another new toy there, the Personas, whatever.
Yep, I got that, and then I also have a cloud amplifier for this, because these mics are notoriously very soft. Right. They're very low mics. So I have an amplifier for it, plus the Persona Studio 68C. I think that's really it. Yeah, that's really it.
I think you got a better setup than I do. I've got a Zoom H4n is the main microphone that I use.
It's good microphone. You sound fine.
It's been a workhorse. This thing has lasted since I got it in 2014. I tried to get these little microphones because I thought maybe I might have more people coming over to the studio for interviews. That's not going to happen anytime soon. the microphones actually aren't as good as I thought they would, or at least they're not recording the way I want them to, and I'd have to do post-production work, which I was trying to minimize by using better microphones. But all right, Tatiana, thank you very much for taking the time. We've talked about a lot today. Where can people find you and get in touch with you if they want to know more?
Well, I guess my socials on Facebook, just type in Hopelessly Tatiana and you'll be taken to my fan page, which I don't post on very often. Sorry, I'm not a social media person. I also have an Instagram, Hopelessly Tatiana. I post on that when I think about it. And I have a Twitter, which is Tati_McLaren. I don't post on that super often either. I'm not really a social media person.
You do have a website? So it's
I do have a website.
HopelesslyTatiana.com, right? Yeah,
Yep.
There it is.
I also don't post on that very often. I told you, not a social media person.
What about here in China? Can people
In
get a hold of
China, Tatiana MCL is my WeChat ID. You can hit me up. Let me know how you heard me, and I'll add you to the podcast group. I am the most active in that WeChat group in it, like of anything, and I think I post in there once a day.
Yeah,
I don't do social media.
That WeChat group is for your podcast. So if people also want to get in touch with me, I can ship them along your way as well.
Just add them right into it. Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. And we will talk again, or we'll see you out there in Beijing once I'm free once again.
Sorry.
It was bound to happen. Everybody else got locked down. Now it's my turn. All right. Thanks a lot, Tatiana.
Thank you for having me.
We'll talk again. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And there you have it. That's episode number 35 with Tatiana McLaren. Hope you guys enjoyed that. I will have the show notes and tracks all available up on my website, stevensersky.com. And if you want to get in touch with Tatiana, you can find her on WeChat or get through to her using the links, the show notes on my website as well. Again, this episode is available on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, and also on my website. You can download the MP3 there as well, stevensersky.com. Folks, thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it. Hope you learned a lot. I know I did. And we're going to do this again. Have a good one. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.